What do you buy after you've bought revenge? Not peace, I can tell you that, but we'll get to it. First, you need to understand where it all started. The day I turned 18, my name might as well have been liability. My mother, Pearl, had baked a grocery store funfetti cake, the kind that smells like chemicals and regret. It sat on the kitchen island, a sad, rectangular monument to my legal adulthood. The candles were still in the box. No one was coming. I knew they wouldn't. My older sister, Zoe, showed up around noon. She was 25 then, already a junior associate at some downtown law firm, dressed in a pencil skirt that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. She handed me a gift bag containing a beige sweater and a gift card to a bookstore. Happy birthday, Paris, she said, checking her watch. I can't stay long. I have a meeting. Thanks for coming, I said, forcing a smile that felt like cracking plaster. She gave a tight nod, her eyes scanning the empty living room. Did Mom and Dad go out? They're in the study. She didn't ask to see them. She never did. 10 minutes of stilted small talk later, she was gone, leaving behind the scent of expensive perfume and familial obligation. I sat alone at the island, staring at the unlit cake, the silence of the house pressing in on me. This was it. The big 1-8. The day I was supposed to get the college fund my parents had talked about since I was a kid, the nest egg that was my one-way ticket out of this quiet, suffocating house. An hour later, my father, Calvin, walked into the kitchen. He was 49 then, a man who measured the world in profit and loss. He didn't wish me a happy birthday. He just leaned against the counter, his arms crossed. My mother trailed behind him like a shadow. We need to talk about the college fund, he said. His voice was flat, like he was discussing a quarterly report. I felt a knot of ice form in my stomach, but I kept my face neutral. Okay, I've been accepted to 3 state schools. I just need to send the deposit. He shook his head slowly. There's been a change of plans. We've decided to make a different investment. I waited. My mother stared at a spot on the floor, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. You know your cousin, Savannah, he continued. Her boyfriend, Kelvin, has a very promising business proposal, a tech startup. He needs seed money to get it off the ground. We think it's a much better use of the capital. The air left my lungs. Savannah, my uncle's daughter, was the golden girl. 17, popular, and effortlessly perfect. Her boyfriend, Kelvin, was a 19-year-old community college dropout who wore brand name hoodies and called everyone bro. This was their solid investment. You're giving my college money to Kelvin? I asked, the words tasting like ash. It's not your money, Paris, Calvin corrected me, his tone sharp. It's our money, and we're investing it. Kelvin is a go getter. He has a vision. Frankly, we don't see the same return on investment with you. I looked at my mother. She finally met my gaze, her expression pleading. Don't make a scene, her eyes begged. Just accept it. And that's what broke me. Not the betrayal, but her silent complicity. I had spent 18 years trying to be seen by these people, and in the end, I was just a poorly performing asset being liquidated. I stood up, my chair scraping against the tile. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I refused to give them the satisfaction. I just nodded, a single, sharp dip of my chin. Okay, I said. The word was a shard of glass in my throat. I walked upstairs to my room, pulled out the duffel bag I'd had since summer camp, and started packing. A few pairs of jeans, some t shirts, my laptop, and the $200 I had saved from a summer job. I left the beige sweater on the bed. As I walked past the kitchen, my father was on the phone, probably finalizing the wire transfer to his new favorite entrepreneur. My mother was finally cutting the cake, her movements stiff and mechanical. They didn't look up as I opened the front door and stepped out into the rest of my life. I closed it softly behind me, but in my head I slammed it shut. Standing on the curb of that quiet, perfect cul de sac, I made a silent vow. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was a cold, hard promise I made to myself. They'll remember me one day. That was the last real conversation I had with my father for 9 years. The next time we spoke, it was because I had just bought his house. The first few years are a blur of cold car seats and the fluorescent hum of 24-hour diners. My $200 vanished in a week. I spent a month on the couch of a high school friend until her mom started making comments about my lack of ambition. I spent the next two on another friend's floor, then another's. Eventually, the couches ran out. My home became my beat up sedan. I learned which strip mall parking lots didn't have security patrols and which public parks had outlets near the picnic tables. My diet consisted of instant ramen cooked with hot water from gas station coffee machines and whatever was on the dollar menu. Every day was a masterclass in survival logistics. Find a place to shower, find free Wi Fi, find somewhere to charge my laptop, and try not to look like I was living out of a 2004 Honda Civic. The public library became my office. It was warm, quiet, and the internet was free. While Kelvin was probably spending my college fund on ergonomic chairs and a ping pong table for his startup, I was hunched over a sticky library keyboard teaching myself to code. I devoured free online tutorials, downloaded programming textbooks, and filled notebooks with lines of Python and Java. It was the only thing I could control. The logic was clean, absolute. A line of code either worked or it didn't. There were no feelings, no favoritism, no secret resentments, just problems and solutions. About a year in, when I was 20, I was nursing a single coffee for 3 hours at a cafe, using their Wi Fi to debug a personal project, when a familiar voice cut through my concentration. Paris Morris? No way. I looked up. It was Sierra Brooks, a girl I'd had a few classes with in high school. She looked impossibly polished in a blazer, holding a leather portfolio. Her business card was clipped to the front. Sierra Brooks, real estate agent. My face flushed with shame. I probably smelled like my car. Hey, Sierra, long time. What are you up to? She asked, her smile genuine. She didn't seem to notice my frayed hoodie or the desperation clinging to me like static. Just working, I said vaguely, gesturing to my laptop. We made small talk for a few minutes before she had to run to a showing. As she left, she handed me her card. Seriously, if you ever need anything, even just advice on renting, call me. The market's a nightmare. I held on to that card for 6 months. By then, I was doing freelance coding gigs for pennies on the dollar, saving every cent. I finally had enough for a security deposit and first month's rent on a shoebox apartment above a laundromat. I called her. Sierra didn't just help me find the place, she negotiated with the landlord to accept my spotty work history and even waived part of her fee. She never asked why a girl from a nice house in a nice cul de sac was in my position. She just helped. It was the first real kindness I'd received since I left home. In that tiny apartment, fueled by caffeine and a burning need to prove my father wrong, I built my first app. It was a simple task management tool. I poured everything I had into it 18 months of coding, debugging, and dreaming. I launched it into the App Store and waited for the world to change. It didn't. The app bombed. It got a few dozen downloads, mostly from pitying freelance clients. I'd sent the business plan to over 50 angel investors. I got 49 rejections and one ghost. The final rejection email arrived on a Tuesday morning. It was from a venture capitalist in Silicon Valley. I remember the first line perfectly because it felt like my father himself had written it. This isn't personal, but you're not CEO material. I stared at the words on the screen, the cursor blinking patiently. The old me, the 18-year-old girl on the curb, would have crumpled, but I wasn't her anymore. I stood up, walked to the printer I'd bought at a thrift store, and printed the email. I bought a cheap black frame from the dollar store. I hung it on the wall across from my desk, right in my line of sight. It was a reminder, not of my failure, but of theirs. Revenge is a dish best served cold, but sometimes you get to watch it go stale on someone else's plate first. For years, I avoided social media like it was a contagion, a digital window into a life I was locked out of. But after the sting of my first failure faded, curiosity became a morbid obsession. I made a fake profile and went searching. It didn't take long to find Savannah. Her life was an open book of curated perfection brunch photos, beach vacations, and endless smiling selfies with Kelvin. He was always tagged, his own profile a shrine to hustle culture cliches, motivational quotes over pictures of luxury cars he didn't own. Their startup was called Innovatech, a name so generic it was almost poetic. According to their posts, they were on the verge of changing the world. Then, about 3 years after I'd left home, the posts started to change. The vacation pictures stopped. The captions became less about Barcher blessed and more about Darjant the grind. Finally, one Tuesday, all pictures of Kelvin vanished from Savannah's profile. A week later, she posted a teary eyed story about new beginnings and toxic energy. I dug deeper. Innovatech's corporate registration had been dissolved. A local business blog had a short article about its failure, citing mismanagement of seed funding. My college fund, gone. Poof, wasted on a bad idea and a worse boyfriend. I felt a grim, satisfying smile spread across my face. The golden girl had finally cracked. Seeing their failure was the fuel I needed. The framed rejection email on my wall wasn't just a reminder of their doubt, it was a blueprint of what not to do. My first app was a solution looking for a problem. This time, I'd solve a problem I knew intimately vulnerability. Living in my car, I'd relied on unsecured public Wi Fi my entire life. Bank details, freelance contracts, personal emails, one data breach away from total ruin. So I built Aegis, a one tap data encryption and privacy app. It was lean, fast, and user friendly. For 2 years, I worked on it relentlessly, living off cheap coffee and the fumes of my own ambition. I was 24 when it launched. For months, it had a slow but steady growth, mostly through word of mouth in tech circles. Then, a vlogger who specialized in cybersecurity made a video demonstrating how easily she could hack into a coffee shop's public network. At the end of the video, she held up her phone. Or, she said, you could just download this. She tapped the Aegis icon. The video got 10 million views in a week. My user base exploded overnight. The servers almost crashed, and my inbox, once a graveyard of rejections, was suddenly flooded with emails from the same venture capital firms that had ignored me. The seed money changed everything. I moved out of the shoebox apartment. I hired a small team. I traded my frayed hoodies for tailored blazers and learned to command a boardroom. I cut my hair into a sharp, no nonsense bob. The girl who ate ramen in her car was gone. In her place was a CEO. The transformation wasn't just physical, it was a hardening, a sharpening of my edges. I learned to speak the language of my father assets, liabilities, and return on investment. A year and a half later, a major tech conglomerate came knocking. They wanted to acquire Aegis and integrate its technology into their flagship operating system. The negotiations were brutal, lasting 6 weeks. They tried to lowball me, to intimidate me, to talk down to me. They didn't realize I had been training for this my whole life. I had nothing to lose and a lifetime of being underestimated to avenge. I walked out of the final meeting, a multimillionaire before my 26th birthday. The deal was for 10.6 million. The first person I called wasn't a friend or a mentor, it was a lawyer. Barry McCormick, a 44-year-old shark who specialized in corporate law and discrete asset acquisition. I hired him to set up an LLC for me. He handled the paperwork, the wire transfers, everything. I never had to set foot in a bank. A week after the deal closed, an email from Barry landed in my inbox. Subject: Asset list for review. The body of the email was simple: Paris. Attached is the preliminary list of residential properties in the target area for acquisition by the LLC. Please review and confirm you are ready to proceed. Regards, Barry McCormick. I opened the attachment. It was a list of addresses, 7 of them, all on the same quiet, perfect cul-de-sac. My finger traced down the screen, past the Miller's house, past the Garcias, until it landed on the third one down. My childhood home. I stared at the list of addresses, my heart a cold, steady drum against my ribs. This was it, the point of no return. I picked up my phone and dialed the number I still had saved from years ago. Sierra Brooks Realty, this is Sierra. Sierra, it's Paris Morris. There was a beat of stunned silence, then Paris! Oh my god, I heard about Aegis. Congratulations, that's incredible. Thanks, I said, cutting through the pleasantries. I need a realtor, a discreet one. I'm looking to buy some residential properties and I need an agent who can represent an LLC without asking too many questions. I can do that, she said, her voice shifting into professional mode. What area are you looking at? A cul-de-sac off of Willow Creek Drive. Another pause. She knew the neighborhood. She knew whose houses were there. But true to her word, she didn't ask the questions burning on her tongue. She just said, "Send me the list. I'll get started on the initial offers." The LLC needed a name. Barry's email had a blank field for it. I typed in the first thing that came to mind: Karma, LLC. It felt fitting. Over the next 3 months, Karma, LLC, became the neighborhood ghost story. Sierra was brilliant. She approached each homeowner with an aggressive all cash offer well above market value. The story she spun was that a tech company was buying up the properties to build a private corporate housing complex for relocating executives. It was plausible enough to quell most suspicions. People in that neighborhood had been complaining about tech money gentrifying the area for years. Now it was at their doorstep with a checkbook. One by one, they sold. The Garcias, who wanted to retire to Florida. The Millers, whose kids were grown. Each sale was a quiet, clinical transaction, a name crossed off a list. Barry handled the paperwork, wiring the funds from a corporate account. My name was nowhere. I was a ghost, pulling strings from a downtown high rise. With every signed contract, memories I had buried deep began to surface. I remembered a summer barbecue when I was 16. My Uncle Harold was holding court by the grill, laughing as Kelvin, ever the showman, pitched another one of his half baked ideas. I'd mentioned that I was saving up for a better laptop for a coding class. My father overheard. "Don't waste your money," he'd said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You can't even afford to put gas in that junker you drive. Focus on getting a real job." The adults chuckled. Savannah shot me a look of pity that was worse than any insult. I felt my face burn, the humiliation coiling in my gut. Now I was buying their houses. All of them. The fifth house to sell belonged to my Uncle Harold. The sixth was Savannah's condo, which her parents had bought for her a few years back. She was 26 now, working as a social media manager for some boutique clothing store. According to Sierra, she jumped at the offer, probably desperate for the cash after Kelvin had drained her savings. The irony was so thick I could taste it. The final holdout was my parents. They loved that house. It was a symbol of their success, of the perfect life they had built. Sierra said they rejected the first two offers outright. My father, ever the pragmatist, probably thought he could negotiate a higher price. He didn't know he was negotiating with a ghost. I told Sierra to make a final offer 30% above the highest appraisal. "Tell them it's non negotiable and it expires in 24 hours," I instructed. Calvin couldn't resist. Greed won out over sentimentality. The next day, Sierra called me. "They signed," she said. "The whole cul-de-sac is yours. All 7 properties have closed." I felt a strange, hollow victory. It was done. The board was set. That evening, an email from Barry arrived. It was as concise as ever. Subject: Final closing confirmation. Paris. The final property has closed and the title has been transferred to Karma, LLC. The previous owners have a standard 30-day period to vacate, as per the sales agreement. Shall I initiate the formal eviction process to ensure compliance with the deadline? Regards, Barry McCormick. I sat there for a long time, the city lights twinkling outside my window. I thought about the girl on the curb, the girl in the cars, the girl with the framed rejection email. I thought about the unlit birthday cake. I typed my reply. Yes. Make sure the notice has my full name in bold. 30 days later, I was back. Not on the curb, but parked across the street in a black Audi that purred so quietly you couldn't hear it running. It was a Saturday morning, mail delivery time. I wore oversized sunglasses, but there was no one around to see me. The street was just as I remembered it: manicured lawns, identical mailboxes, a suffocating sense of suburban peace. The mail truck made its slow, cheerful rounds. I watched as the little red flags on the mailboxes went down, one by one. A few minutes later, Mr. Garcia from next door was the first to emerge. He ambled down his driveway, retrieved his mail, and flipped through it as he walked back. He stopped dead in his tracks. I saw him read the letter, then read it again, his face a mask of confusion. Then my father's front door opened. Calvin, now 58, looked grayer, thinner. He collected the mail with the same brisk, efficient movements he did everything else with. He paused at the top of the driveway, his eyes scanning the crisp, official letterhead. His expression didn't change at first. It was the same cold, analytical mask he always wore. But then his jaw tightened. A muscle began to twitch in his cheek. He looked up from the paper, his eyes sweeping across the street as if searching for the source of this incomprehensible attack. That's when the screaming started. It came from Savannah's condo down the street. The door flew open and she stormed out, a piece of paper clutched in her hand. She was 26, but in that moment she looked like a furious child. Her eyes locked onto my parents' house, and she marched across the lawn, not even bothering with the sidewalk. She started banging on their front door. Uncle Calvin! Aunt Pearl! Did you see this? Did you get one of these letters? The door opened, and my mother appeared, looking flustered. Before she could speak, Savannah shoved the paper in her face. It's an eviction notice. It says we have to be out in 30 days. And look at the name at the bottom. Look at it. I couldn't hear their muffled conversation, but I could see the panic blooming. My Uncle Harold came jogging over from his house, his face red. More doors opened. The quiet cul-de-sac was buzzing with confusion and outrage. Then Savannah's head whipped around, her eyes scanning the street. They landed on my car. It was the only one on the block that didn't belong. She squinted, then her eyes widened in recognition. She pointed a trembling finger. You! She shrieked and started running towards me. She pounded on my driver's side window, her face contorted with rage. Paris? What the hell did you do? You did this! Open this door, you psycho! How could you do this to us? To your own family? I didn't move. I just watched her, my expression unreadable behind the dark lenses. Her betrayal had been a quiet knife in the back. Mine was a public spectacle. The scene triggered a memory, sharp and painful. I was 19, home for a forced Christmas visit. My car had broken down, and I'd spent my last $40 on the repair, leaving me with no money for gas to get back to my friend's couch. I'd asked my father if I could borrow $20. He'd refused. Later, at the family barbecue, Kelvin was holding court, pitching his Innovatech idea. He was charming and confident, and the family hung on his every word. It's about disrupting the market, he'd said, using buzzwords he barely understood. My father had clapped him on the back. Now this is a young man with a future, he'd boomed. Then he'd looked right at me and said, See, Paris, that's what ambition looks like. Not asking for handouts for gas money. The laughter felt like stones being thrown at me. Now Savannah was still screaming, her voice hoarse. My father was striding towards my car, his face a thundercloud. My mother stood on the lawn, her hands covering her mouth, tears streaming down her face. She looked up at the sky, her body shaking with sobs. Why? She wailed to no one in particular. Why would anyone do this to us? I took a deep breath. Showtime. I pressed the button to lower the window, the smooth hum of the motor cutting through Savannah's tirade. I took off my sunglasses, letting them all see my face, my eyes. I looked past Savannah, past my furious father, and directly at my weeping mother. My voice was calm, clear, and loud enough for all of them to hear. I believe you called me a mistake. Silence fell over the cul-de-sac. My mother stared at me, her mouth agape, the sound of her own question hanging in the air between us. My father's face hardened, the anger replaced by a cold, calculating pragmatism. He was already shifting from outrage to negotiation. Paris, he said, his voice dangerously level. Get out of the car. We need to talk about this. Sensibly. I killed the engine and stepped out, the expensive leather of my boots making no sound on the asphalt. I was 27 now, and for the first time in my life I was taller than him. Or at least it felt that way. There's nothing to talk about, I said. The properties were purchased legally. The eviction notices are legally binding. You have 30 days. This is insane, Savannah sputtered, finding her voice again. You bought our homes just to kick us out? Why? Think of it as a portfolio diversification, I said, my eyes on Calvin. You taught me all about making smart investments after all. He ignored the jab. Listen to me, he said, stepping closer. This is your family, your home. We can work something out. You can rent the houses back to us. We'll draw up a lease agreement. It would be a steady income stream for you. I almost laughed. Even now, facing homelessness, his mind went straight to the bottom line. He saw a financial opportunity, not a daughter he had broken. The houses won't be available for rent, I said calmly. I'm donating them. That stopped him. Donating them? To who? A nonprofit that runs shelters, I said, letting the words land with precision. Specifically, shelters for young adults who have been kicked out of their homes for being unwanted. Once you've all vacated the premises, I'm having the interiors gutted. All of them, just to make sure there's nothing left of the past. My mother let out a strangled sob. My father looked like I had physically struck him. Just then, another car pulled up. It was my sister Zoe. Now 34, she looked tired, the lines of stress around her eyes deeper than I remembered. She got out of her car, took in the scene, the crying, the yelling, the neighbors peering from behind their curtains, and her shoulders slumped. She walked straight past our parents, past Savannah, and came to me. I got your text, she said quietly. Is this really necessary? They made it necessary, I replied. She sighed, running a hand through her hair. Can we talk? Alone? She pulled me aside, away from the prying eyes and simmering rage. Paris, I know why you're doing this. I get it. They were awful to you. But this is something else. This is justice, I corrected her. Is it? She asked, her gaze searching mine. Look, I have to tell you something. Something I should have told you a long time ago. She took a deep breath. The week after you left, I came by the house. I tried to give Mom and Dad $5,000 for you. It was most of my savings. I told them to make sure you got it, to help you get on your feet. I called them a week later to see if you'd gotten it, and they said you'd refused it. They said you were too proud and wanted nothing from them. I stared at her, the world tilting slightly on its axis. $5,000. Back then, that amount would have been life changing. It would have meant a security deposit, a real bed, a chance to breathe. They never told me, I whispered. I know, Zoe said, her voice thick with regret. I believed them. It was easier than believing they'd just keep it. I'm so sorry, Paris. I should have found you myself. I didn't know what to say. For 9 years, I had believed Zoe was just as complicit as the rest of them, offering a cheap sweater and empty platitudes. But she had tried. In her own flawed way, she had tried to help. Before I could process it, Savannah stomped over, her face blotchy with tears and fury. Are you happy now? She spat at me, tearing everyone's lives apart. You started this, I said, my voice cold again. You and your brilliant boyfriend. She let out a bitter, ugly laugh. Me? You want to blame me for this? You have no idea what really happened? She took a step closer, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. You want to know why your father bet on Kelvin instead of you? It wasn't just about the money. He did it because he thought you'd fail and run off, just like your birth mom did. The world stopped. My breath caught in my chest. I felt the blood drain from my face. What did you just say? Oh, you didn't know? Savannah sneered, sensing she'd hit a nerve. You're not really Pearl's daughter. You're the product of some affair your dad had. Your real mom dropped you on their doorstep and disappeared. You were always the mistake, Paris. The reminder. Savannah's words hung in the air, sharper than glass. I turned slowly, my gaze locking onto my father. Zoe looked horrified, shaking her head at Savannah. You shouldn't have, she whispered. But the damage was done. My mother, Pearl, wouldn't meet my eyes. She just stood there, a statue of shame. But Calvin's face was all the confirmation I needed. The cold mask was gone, replaced by a flicker of something I'd never seen before. Guilt. Is it true? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. He flinched but held my gaze. It's complicated. It sounds pretty simple to me, I said, walking towards him, my footsteps echoing in the stunned silence. Is it true? He finally gave a stiff, jerky nod. Your birth mother? She had an affair with me. She left you with us when you were 6 months old. Pearl was good enough to raise you as her own. The words good enough dripped with a sense of martyrdom I now understood. All those years of her passive detachment, her inability to stand up for me, it wasn't just weakness. I was a living monument to her husband's infidelity. So, all of it, I said, the pieces clicking into place with sickening clarity. The college fund Kelvin writing me off, it was because I was a reminder. I saw the same recklessness in you that she had, he admitted, his voice raspy. I thought you'd just throw the money away, disappear like she did. Kelvin seemed like a safer bet. A laugh escaped my lips, dry and humorless. A safer bet. You bet on the wrong person, Dad. I leaned in, my voice dropping so only he could hear. And now I'm the landlord. I turned my back on him and walked towards the house. My house. I pulled the new keys from my pocket and unlocked the front door. The air inside was stale, filled with the scent of their lives. Family photos lined the hallway mantel. Zoe's graduation, Savannah's prom, family vacations I was never invited on. There were no pictures of me. With a sweep of my arm, I knocked them all to the floor, frames shattered, glass skittering across the hardwood. I walked from room to room, a ghost in my own past. In the living room, I saw the faint, dark scorch mark on the wall near the fireplace, a permanent scar from a screaming match I'd had with my father when I was 15. He'd thrown a fireplace poker in my direction. It had missed me and hit the wall. Pearl had painted over it, but you could still see the ghost of the burn if you looked closely. I ran my fingers over it. This was the only proof I had ever really lived here. The next few weeks were a blur of logistics. My family scattered. My parents moved into a small rental apartment across town. Uncle Harold and his family went to stay with relatives. Savannah, I heard, was living on a friend's couch. The irony was not lost on me. On the final day, the demolition crew arrived. I had arranged for it all. A crowd had gathered at the end of the cul de sac, a mix of news crews I had tipped off and curious onlookers. I had a camera crew of my own, filming for a promotional video for my new foundation. The tagline was "Building a New Foundation," literally. I stood on what used to be the Garcia's lawn and gave the foreman the signal. The excavator's arm rose, a giant metal claw against the morning sky. It swung towards my old house, my first prison. The claw bit into the roof, tearing through shingles and plywood with a deafening crunch. The whole structure shuddered, walls buckled. The second floor collapsed into the first. It was violent and total. I watched as my childhood bedroom disintegrated into a pile of splintered wood and drywall. I watched as the kitchen where I'd been denied my future was crushed into rubble. The whole thing was over in less than an hour. 7 houses reduced to 7 piles of debris. My family was there, standing at the edge of the police tape, watching their history fall. My father's face was unreadable stone. Pearl was openly weeping. Savannah just stared, her face a mixture of hatred and disbelief. When the last wall came down and a cloud of dust settled over the wreckage, Zoe approached me. She looked at the rubble, then at me. Her expression wasn't angry, just sad. You did it, she said. It wasn't a question. I just nodded, the adrenaline starting to fade, leaving a hollow ache in its place. I hope you find what you're looking for in all this, she said. Then she looked me straight in the eye, and for the first time I felt like she was seeing all of me, the broken girl and the woman who had burned it all down. No matter what they did, she said, her voice soft but clear, I do see you. The grand opening of the Phoenix Hub was a polished, media friendly affair. Where 7 suburban houses once stood, there was now a sleek, modern complex, a community center with co working spaces, tech labs for underprivileged kids, and temporary housing units on the upper floors. The promotional video featuring the dramatic demolition footage played on a loop on a giant screen. I stood at a podium, delivering a speech about resilience, second chances, and building a better future from the rubble of the past. The applause was loud. The camera flashes were blinding. But as I smiled and shook hands, I felt a profound, echoing silence inside me. I had won. I had razed my past to the ground and built a monument on its ashes. Vengeance was satisfying, a fire that had burned hot and bright, but now that it was over, all that was left was the cold. Family betrayal leaves a void that no amount of success or destruction can fill. I saw Zoe standing at the back of the crowd, watching me. We hadn't spoken since the demolition. After my speech, as donors and journalists swarmed me, she made her way through the throng. She didn't offer congratulations or platitudes. She just held out a small rectangular gift wrapped box. I was cleaning out some of my old things from my parents' place, she said. I found this. I thought you should have it. I took the box, my fingers fumbling with the ribbon. Inside was a book, a thick, heavy college textbook on introductory computer science. Tucked inside the front cover was a faded sticky note. In Zoe's neat handwriting, it said, "For coffee during the long nights. I'm proud of you." And tucked under the note was a crisp $20 bill. I looked at her, confused. "I don't understand." "It was your 18th birthday gift," she explained, her voice quiet. "The real one, not that stupid sweater. I was going to give you this. I wanted to tell you that I believed in your coding stuff even if no one else did. But I chickened out. I saw how they were and I was a coward. I took the easy way out." I stared at the $20 bill, the same amount I'd asked my father for at Christmas, the money he'd refused me. Zoe had been about to give it to me all along. Just like the $5,000, it was another secret, another kindness buried under the weight of my family's cruelty. It was a gesture that would have meant the world to the girl I was then. "Thank you," I said, the words feeling heavy and inadequate. She gave me a small, sad smile. "I'm not asking for forgiveness, Paris. I just wanted you to know." She turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Later that evening, long after the catered food had been cleared and the last of the guests had gone home, I walked through the empty courtyard of the hub. The air was cool, and the new buildings were lit with a soft, welcoming glow. I sat on a bench where my old house used to be, the textbook resting on my lap. I had spent 9 years fueled by a narrative of total abandonment. It was a simple, clean story, me against them. But Zoe's small, failed attempts at kindness complicated it. They didn't excuse anything, but they added shades of gray to a world I had painted in black and white. She had seen me, even when I couldn't see her. The victory wasn't the demolition. It wasn't the eviction notices or the look on my father's face. The real victory was quiet, happening right now in this empty courtyard. It was the realization that I had survived them. I had built something from the nothing they gave me. The emptiness I felt wasn't a failure, it was just the space where the pain used to be. It was up to me to decide what to build there now. I opened the textbook. The $20 bill felt smooth and real in my hand. They called me a mistake, so I became their one irreversible decision.